"Heathen filth," Roland Baxter snarled, crashing through Chayton's tent with a fistful of splintered wood. Chayton's knife hovered over an unfinished bow, his breath catching as Mosi flinched, her sketches scattering like ash in a storm. Baxter's venomous grin widened as he shoved Mosi, hissing "Mad Indian," kindling a blaze of fury in Chayton's chest. The oil lamp toppled, flames clawing at the tent's edge, and in a flash, Chayton's blade grazed Baxter's throat, a thin red line blooming. With shouts of "murderer" swelling and the sheriff's boots thundering closer, Chayton stood at a brutal crossroads: flee with his fragile sister or bow to a world that loathed them. Chayton, a 31-year-old Lakota man in 1897 South Dakota, carved bows with hands scarred by loss, his heart heavy from the Wounded Knee massacre that stole his parents. Each day he guarded Mosi, his 18-year-old sister, whose mind flickered like a broken flame after horrors at a boarding school. Shunned by white townsfolk for refusing mine work, Chayton scraped by, his only warmth found in stolen glances at Clara, a kind white schoolteacher whose love was forbidden by both their worlds. Torn between saving Mosi's fading spirit and chasing a dream of love, he walked a razor's edge in a land that branded him an outcast. The air in Chayton's tent hung heavy with the scent of pine and oil as Roland Baxter's voice shattered the morning calm. "Heathen filth," he roared, kicking the flap aside, his boots grinding dirt into the woven rug. Chayton's hand froze, his carving knife poised above a half-finished bow, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight of Baxter clutching splintered wood. Mosi, hunched over her sketches, let out a soft whimper, her trembling fingers dropping a charcoal stick. Baxter's sneer twisted as he stepped closer, tossing the wood at Chayton's feet, accusing him of stealing from the mine's land. "You think you can take what's ours?" he spat, his voice dripping venom. Chayton rose, shielding Mosi, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. Before he could speak, Sheriff Walton's shadow loomed at the entrance, his cold voice declaring Chayton had one day to surrender or face a manhunt. Mosi's wide eyes met Chayton's, her silent plea cutting deeper than Baxter's words. He clenched his fists, knowing the world outside despised them, yet vowing to protect his sister, no matter the cost. Chayton's hands shook as he knelt beside Mosi, her frail frame curled in the corner of the tent. Her sketches lay scattered, jagged lines of faceless men scratched into the hide, a mirror of her fear. "Mosi, look at me," he whispered, but her gaze stayed fixed on the floor, her breath shallow and ragged. The memory of Baxter's shove replayed in Chayton's mind, the cruel way he'd called her "Mad Indian," fueling a burning anger. He brushed a bruise blooming on her arm, guilt twisting his gut for failing to shield her. Searching for Clara's last vial of calming tea, he found only an empty jar, his hope sinking. Mosi rocked gently, muttering sounds that broke Chayton's heart, her mind trapped in a place he couldn't reach. He pulled a blanket over her, promising to keep her safe, though doubt gnawed at him. The tent felt smaller, the walls closing in as he imagined the sheriff's men circling. With a heavy breath, he resolved to flee that night, determined to carry Mosi far from this hatred, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Clara's soft knock broke the tense silence, her shadow flickering through the tent flap under the midday sun. Chayton opened it, his chest tightening at her worried eyes, right against her pale face. "I heard about Baxter," she said, slipping inside. A small bottle of calming syrup clutched in her hands. She knelt beside Mosi, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face, her touch gentle but firm. "This might help," she murmured, offering the syrup, though her voice wavered with fear for Chayton. She pressed a book of hand signs into his hands, explaining it could help Mosi speak without words, her hope clashing with the grim air. Chayton's fingers lingered on the book, gratitude mixing with the ache of their forbidden bond. "Don't run," Clara urged, her eyes pleading, warning of the danger beyond the hills. But Chayton shook his head, his jaw tight, unable to trust a sheriff who served men like Baxter. As Clara left, promising to find a doctor, Chayton watched her go, his heart torn between her kindness and the desperate need to save his sister. The Lakota camp buzzed with murmurs as Chayton stepped into the council tent, Hastien's stern gaze pinning him like an arrow. The elder's voice boomed, accusing Chayton of shaming their people by clashing with Baxter. "You bring trouble to our door," Hastiin said, his braided hair glinting in the firelight, ignoring Chayton's explanation of Mosi's suffering. A young warrior, Taza, nodded at Chayton, his eyes fierce, but Hastiin silenced him, warning that running would mark them all as guilty. Chayton's chest burned, his fists clenching as he recounted Baxter's cruelty, yet Hastien's doubt stung deeper than expected. An old woman, her face lined with years, spoke of wounded knee, her voice trembling, urging unity, but Hastiin dismissed her, ordering Chayton to leave. As he stepped into the cold evening, whispers of a mysterious bowmaker reached his ears, a fleeting spark of intrigue. Chayton's resolve hardened. Abandoned by his people, he would protect Mosi alone, his heart heavy but unyielding against the weight of their judgment. Moonlight spilled over the camp as Chayton packed a worn leather bag, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. Mosi slept fitfully, clutching a sketch of their mother, her soft breaths a fragile reminder of why he fought. He tucked in a bow, arrows, and dried meat, each item a tether to survival. Kneeling by Mosi, he whispered, "Wake up, Mosi," his voice gentle but urgent, explaining they must leave for the sacred lands. Her eyes fluttered open, wide with fear, but she nodded, trusting him completely. Chayton scrawled a note for Clara, words of thanks and farewell, and slipped it under her door, his heart aching at the thought of leaving her. He slung the bag over his shoulder, lifted Mosi's slight frame, and stepped into the night, avoiding the main paths. Stars glittered above, guiding them toward the desert, and Chayton prayed to the ancestors, his voice low, begging for strength to keep Mosi safe in a world that sought to break them. The forest swallowed Chayton and Mosi, its shadows thick with the chill of dawn. Pine needles crunched underfoot as he carried Mosi, her weight light but growing heavier with each step. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, her face pale under the moonlight, stirring panic in Chayton's gut. He whispered tales of their ancestors, brave Lakota hunters, hoping to calm her, but her eyes stayed distant, lost in fear. They paused by a stream, its water glinting like silver, and Chayton offered her a sip, though she barely swallowed. He checked his crude map, the sacred land still days away, a daunting horizon. A distant howl, sharp and wild, made Mosi cling to him, her nails digging into his arm. Chayton covered their tracks, his heart racing, sensing the sheriff's dogs closing in. He tightened his grip on Mosi, vowing to outrun the hatred chasing them, his every step a defiance of the world that branded them outcasts. A sharp twang broke the forest's silence, and Chayton spun, his bow raised, as an arrow thudded into a nearby pine. A scrap of paper clung to its shaft, scrawled with urgent words. "Baxter hides secrets at Western Camp. Beware." The arrow's fletching, adorned with Lakota beads, stirred Chayton's suspicion, its craftsmanship too familiar, too ancestral. Mosi pointed at it, her trembling hand sketching a shadowy archer in the dirt, her eyes wide with wonder. Chayton scanned the trees, feeling watched, his skin prickling under an unseen gaze. Was this a trap or a lifeline? He tucked the note into his pocket, its weight heavy with possibility, and steered Mosi away from the Western camp, choosing caution over curiosity. A low, eerie howl echoed, not a wolf but something human, sending Mosi into his arms, her fear a knife in his heart. Chayton held her close, whispering promises of safety, though doubt gnawed at his resolve. Mosi's forehead burned under Chayton's palm, her fever spiking as they huddled in a makeshift lean-to of branches and hides. Her shivers rattled her small frame, each one a stab of helplessness in Chayton's chest. He wrapped her in their only blanket, its worn wool no match for the desert's creeping cold. Memories of Clara's calming syrup flooded back, but their supplies held nothing, leaving him grasping at air. Mosi mumbled, her words tangled in nightmares of the boarding school, each syllable a wound to Chayton's soul. He built a small fire, its glow weak but defiant, and prayed to the spirits, his voice cracking with desperation. The fever's grip tightened, forcing a choice. Risk returning to town for Clara's help or press on, endangering Mosi further. Chayton kissed her burning brow, his heart splitting as he decided to turn back, knowing the town held as much danger as salvation. The town slept under a starless sky as Chayton crept to Clara's cabin, his cloak blending with the shadows. He tapped her window, heart pounding, and her face appeared, pale and wide-eyed with relief. "You're alive," she whispered, pulling him inside, her hands trembling as she handed him a vial of medicine and bandages. She spoke of Baxter's men prowling the hills, their torches like wolves' eyes, and mentioned strange crates at his western camp, her words echoing the arrow's note. Chayton shared the message, his voice low, watching Clara's brow furrow with worry. She scribbled a doctor's name in the city, her pen shaking, promising to send word. Their fingers brushed as she passed the supplies, a fleeting warmth in the cold night. Clara's eyes held him, urging him to stay, but Chayton shook his head, the pull of Mosi's need stronger than his longing. He slipped back into the dark, her gaze lingering like a star he couldn't reach. The western camp's lanterns flickered as Chayton crouched behind a crate, the air thick with the stench of oil and greed. Guards patrolled, their boots crunching gravel, forcing him to move like a ghost. Inside a tent, he found a glass vial labeled "Croplight," its murky contents glinting with malice, and a stack of letters sealed with a coal company's crest. The papers spoke of unused lands and ruined harvests, a plot to starve the Lakota into submission, each word fueling Chayton's rage. He stuffed the vial and letters into his satchel, his hand steady despite the fire in his veins. A guard's lantern swung too close, its light grazing his shadow, and Chayton held his breath, heart hammering. He darted into the trees, branches clawing his skin, as a shout rang out behind him. The evidence burned in his pack, a dangerous truth that could save his people or doom them all. Urging him back to Mosi with a desperate hope, Chayton's heart thundered as he clutched the stolen letters, their words searing his mind. A plot to ruin Lakota crops and seize their land. Under the moon's pale glow, he read of Baxter's deal with a coal company, each line a betrayal that choked him with rage. Mosi stirred in the lean-to, her feverish murmurs pulling him back, her face ghostly in the firelight. The vial of Croplight weighed heavy in his satchel, a poison meant to starve his people. He knelt beside Mosi, brushing sweat from her brow, guilt gnawing at him for leaving her even briefly. The forest rustled and Chayton tensed, gripping his knife, fearing Baxter's men had tracked him. A twig snapped, but no one emerged, leaving only the wind's mournful howl. He tucked the evidence deeper into his pack, knowing it could change everything or cost their lives. Chayton whispered to Mosi, promising to expose the truth, his voice trembling with resolve. The weight of their survival pressed down, but the spark of hope from those papers drove him to plan his next move. The forest erupted with shouts as Amos, Baxter's brutal enforcer, crashed through the underbrush, his lantern casting wild shadows. "There's the thief!" he bellowed, his dogs snarling, their eyes glinting like coals. Chayton scooped Mosi into his arms, her frail body limp, and bolted, branches tearing at his skin. Her shallow breath spurred his panic, each step a desperate bid to outrun capture. Amos fired a shot into the air, the crack splitting the night, making Mosi whimper against Chayton's chest. He ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding, shielding her as the dog's barks grew closer. Suddenly, an arrow whizzed past, striking Amos's leg, sending him sprawling with a howl of pain. The dog scattered, and Chayton peered out, catching a fleeting glimpse of a cloaked figure vanishing into the trees. He seized the moment, sprinting deeper into the forest, Mosi's weight a burning ache in his arms. Fear and gratitude clashed within him. The mysterious archers aid a lifeline in their darkest hour, urging him to keep running. Chayton collapsed in a hidden clearing, Mosi cradled against him, her fever-hot skin a stark contrast to the cold earth. The arrow's note echoed in his mind, its warning about Baxter's camp now proven true. He checked Mosi's pulse, weak but steady, and draped his cloak over her, his throat tight with worry. The cloaked archers' intervention replayed, a shadow of hope in their flight. Yet Chayton's suspicion lingered. Who was this bowmaker? He pulled the vial and letters from his satchel, their secrets too dangerous to lose, and hid them in a hollow log. Mosi stirred, mumbling their mother's name, her voice a fragile thread pulling at his heart. He whispered reassurances, though his own fear clawed at him, the sheriff's men surely regrouping. A distant owl hooted, calming his nerves, and Chayton resolved to return to the Lakota camp, hoping to rally Hastiin with the truth. He kissed Mosi's forehead, vowing to protect her, the weight of their people's future now resting on his shoulders. The Lakota camp glowed with firelight as Chayton approached, Mosi slung across his back, her weight a constant reminder of her fading strength. He entered Hastien's tent, the elder's eyes cold as stone, his voice sharp with distrust. "You return with more trouble," Hastiin snapped, dismissing Chayton's plea to see the vial of crop blight. Chayton set Mosi gently on a blanket, her sketches spilling out, one showing a cruel-faced man resembling Baxter. He held up the letters, his voice steady despite his racing heart, explaining the plot to ruin their crops. Taza, the young warrior, leaned forward, his jaw tight, but Hastiin waved him off, calling Chayton's evidence a desperate lie. An elder woman gasped at Mosi's drawing, her whisper of recognition ignored by Hastiin. Chayton's hope withered, his chest aching as he begged for trust, only to be ordered out. He lifted Mosi, her warmth grounding him, and left, determined to find another way to expose Baxter's scheme, his spirit bruised but unbroken. Clara's schoolhouse stood quiet, its windows dark, but Amos's hulking figure loomed at the door, his fist pounding the wood. "Open up, teacher," he growled, accusing her of hiding Chayton, his voice thick with menace. Clara stood firm, her hands trembling behind her back, denying any knowledge, her heart racing at the thought of Chayton's danger. Amos kicked a chair, splintering it, his threat to burn the school chilling her blood. "You're one of them now," he sneered, his eyes glinting with cruelty, promising worse if she didn't betray Chayton. Clara's mind flashed to Mosi's fragile face, strengthening her resolve, and she vowed to report Amos to federal marshals. As he stormed out, slamming the door, Clara sank to her knees, fear mingling with defiance. She scrawled a warning note for Chayton, entrusting it to a Lakota boy, her pulse hammering with the risk. Clara lit a candle, its flame a small beacon, and prayed for Chayton's safety, her heart torn between duty and the love she dared not name. In a borrowed tent at the camp's edge, Clara sat beside Mosi, her hands guiding the girl's fingers through simple signs. Safe, friend. Mosi's eyes, dulled by fever, flickered with effort, her first sign for pain breaking Clara's heart. She spoke softly, coaxing Mosi to sign more, and the girl hesitantly formed man and school, her trembling hands painting Baxter's face from dark memories. Clara's breath caught, suspecting Baxter's role in Mosi's trauma. Her stomach twisting with horror, she hugged Mosi, feeling the girl's tears soak her shoulder, a rare moment of trust that warmed her soul. Chayton entered, his face etched with exhaustion, and froze at Mosi's signs, his eyes glistening with pride and sorrow. He knelt beside them, thanking Clara with a look that spoke volumes, his hand brushing hers briefly. Clara handed him a notebook of Mosi's signs, urging him to keep fighting, her voice thick with emotion as she saw the family's unbreakable bond amidst their pain. Dust swirled as Walton's men stormed the Lakota camp, their rifles glinting under the noon sun. "Hastiin, you're hiding a fugitive!" Walton barked, his badge flashing as he shoved the elder toward a wagon. Chayton watched from a ridge, his heart lurching as Hastiin stood tall, his voice calm but defiant, denying any knowledge of Chayton. A soldier struck a young boy who protested, blood streaking the dirt, and women wailed, clutching their children. Walton's men seized the vial of crop blight from Hastien's tent, tossing it to a smirking deputy. Chayton's fists clenched, rage boiling at the injustice, his mind racing to save Hastiin. He slipped closer, hidden by brush, but Mosi's weak cough from their hiding spot stopped him, her safety outweighing his fury. The wagon rattled away with Hastiin, leaving the camp in stunned silence. Chayton vowed to free the elder, his resolve afire against the cold fear gripping his heart. Chayton crouched in the dark, sketching the sheriff's station on a scrap of hide, its stone walls looming in his mind. Mosi rested in a cousin's tent, her fever briefly eased by Clara's medicine, but her soft whimpers haunted him. He sharpened his knife, its edge catching the moonlight, and packed a coil of rope, his hands steady despite the dread in his gut. Clara found him, her face pale, begging him to reconsider, her voice cracking with fear of losing him. "Hastin's our voice," Chayton said, his jaw tight, knowing the elder's freedom meant hope for their people. He entrusted Mosi's care to Clara, his eyes lingering on her, a silent plea for forgiveness. Taza slipped him a flint, his nod, a quiet promise of support. Chayton set out alone, the station's lights flickering in the distance, his heart pounding with the weight of a rescue that could save or doom them all, his every step fueled by duty to his people. A lone arrow thudded into the ground near Chayton's path, its shaft bearing a map to Baxter's hidden cache. The bowmaker's work, marked by Lakota beads, sent a chill down his spine, its precision both a gift and a mystery. Chayton traced the map's lines, leading to a ravine beyond the station, his mind wrestling with trust for this unseen ally. Mosi's fevered face flashed in his thoughts, urging caution, but the map's promise of more evidence tempted him. He hid the arrow in his cloak, its weight a reminder of the risks ahead. A wolf's howl pierced the night, echoing his unease, and he glanced back, half expecting the bowmaker's shadow. The station loomed closer, its guard's lantern swaying like predator's eyes. Chayton tightened his grip on his bow, resolving to free Hastiin first, the map a flickering hope for justice. His heart raced, torn between fear of a trap and the desperate need to expose Baxter's lies. Chayton scaled the station's wall, his fingers gripping cold stone, the night cloaking him like a shroud. He dropped silently into the yard, avoiding a guard's sweeping lantern, his breath shallow as he crept to a side door. Inside, Hastiin sat in a cell, his face bruised but unbowed, stirring pride in Chayton's chest. He picked the lock with a bent wire, his hands trembling, but Walton's voice boomed from the hall, freezing him. "Got you, Indian," Walton sneered, his pistol gleaming as he stepped into clearer light. Chayton lunged, but deputies seized him, their cuffs biting his wrists, dragging him to Hastien's cell. Walton's laugh echoed, promising a noose, and Chayton's heart sank, his failure a heavy stone. Hastien's steady gaze met his, offering silent strength, but despair clawed at Chayton as the cell door slammed shut, trapping them both in a cage of iron and lies, with Mosi's fate hanging in the balance. Clara's heart pounded as she slipped through the Lakota camp, the noon sun casting long shadows over the tents. Mosi lay in a cousin's care, her fever spiking again, her small hands clutching a tattered sketch. Clara knelt beside her, offering a sip of herbal tea, her voice soft as she signed, "Rest," to ease the girl's fear. News of Chayton's capture reached her like a blow, tightening her chest with dread. Disguising herself in a plain shawl, she approached the sheriff's station, posing as a baker's wife, her basket hiding bread laced with a message for Chayton. She passed it to a guard, her hands trembling, whispering, "For the prisoners." Inside, she glimpsed Chayton's shadowed form, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. Sparking hope amidst her fear, Clara lingered, promising Hastin's wife to find a journalist who could expose Walton's corruption. As she left, the guard's suspicious glance chilled her, but she hurried back to Mosi, her resolve burning brighter, fueled by love and defiance against the injustice crushing Chayton's spirit. Mosi's fevered eyes fluttered open in the dim tent, her fingers tracing invisible shapes in the air. Clara was gone, leaving a void that filled Mosi with panic, her breath hitching as she clutched a sketch of Chayton's face. She scratched new lines onto hide, a man with Baxter's cruel sneer, her hands shaking with memories of the boarding school's cold walls. Signing "Danger" over the drawing, she pushed it toward a cousin, her silent plea urgent. The cousin frowned, promising to find Clara, and Mosi curled into a ball, whispering Chayton's name like a prayer. Her body ached, too weak to stand, but her heart clung to hope, picturing her brother's strong hands. A breeze stirred the tent flap, carrying the scent of sage, calming her racing pulse. Mosi drew again, a bow in Chayton's grip, its curve a symbol of his fight, her faith in him unwavering despite the fever's cruel grip, anchoring her to the brother who was her whole world. Iron bars cast shadows across Chayton's face as he sat beside Hastiin in the damp cell, the air thick with mildew and despair. He spoke of the crop blight vial, his voice low, each word heavy with the betrayal it revealed. Hastiin listened, his weathered face softening, regret flickering in his eyes for doubting Chayton's truth. "Baxter's shadow has long haunted us," the elder murmured, recounting past threats to their land, his voice steady but pained. Chayton's chest ached, his apology for bringing trouble met with Hastin's firm hand on his shoulder, a gesture of newfound trust. They whispered plans to expose the coal company's plot if they escaped, their voices blending with resolve. Clara's bread arrived, a note hidden inside urging Chayton to hold on, her words a lifeline in the dark. Hastin's gaze held Chayton's, promising to fight together, their bond forged in shared pain, even as the cell's walls seemed to close in, trapping their hopes. A sudden boom shook the station, smoke billowing from the yard as shouts erupted outside. Chayton's pulse raced, recognizing the bowmaker's handiwork, the chaos, a chance for freedom. He fished a hidden knife from his boot, its blade glinting as he worked the cell's rusty lock. Hastin stood ready, his bruised face set with determination, urging Chayton to hurry. The lock clicked open, and they slipped into the smoky hall, guards scrambling past, unaware of the prisoner's escape. Chayton led Hastin to a broken window, helping the elder climb through, his own heart pounding with fear of recapture. Outside, an arrow lay in the dirt, its note reading, "To the cache," pointing to Baxter's secrets. They ran into the forest, Hastin's labored breaths echoing Chayton's urgency, their freedom a fragile victory. Gratitude for the bowmaker surged in Chayton's chest, mingled with dread as they vanished into the trees, the station's chaos fading behind them. The ravine's shadows swallowed Chayton and Hastin as they followed the bowmaker's map, the air sharp with pine and earth. A wooden shed loomed, its door splintered, and Chayton pried it open, revealing crates of papers and more vials of blight. His hand shook as he read contracts naming Baxter and a coal baron, Carter, their plan to claim Lakota land chilling his blood. Hastien's face darkened, his voice a growl as he cursed Walton's complicity. Chayton stuffed documents into his cloak, each page a weapon against their enemies. A photograph slipped out, showing Baxter shaking Carter's hand, a smug alliance that fueled Chayton's rage. Footsteps crunched outside, and Chayton pulled Hastiin behind a crate. Their breaths held as a guard's lantern passed. They slipped away, the evidence heavy in Chayton's hands, his heart alight with purpose, but shadowed by fear that Mosi's fever was worsening, urging him back to her side. Torches flared as Carter's men descended on the shed, their shouts slicing through the night. "Burn it all," Carter barked, his silk suit out of place in the wild, his voice cold with greed. Chayton and Hastiin crouched in the brush, watching flames devour the shed, papers curling into ash. Chayton clutched the few documents he'd saved, his heart sinking as evidence vanished, though the vial remained safe in his pack. Hastien's cough broke the silence, nearly betraying them, and Chayton gripped his arm, pulling him deeper into the forest. Carter's laugh echoed, boasting of untouchable power, each word a dagger in Chayton's resolve. They stumbled through thorns, Hastien's strength fading, his face pale but defiant. Chayton's mind raced, the loss of the shed a blow, but the saved papers a flickering hope. He vowed to reach Mosi, his fear for her life a fire driving him forward, even as the night seemed to conspire against them. The cousin's tent smelled of sage and worry as Chayton returned, his cloak torn, Hastiin leaning heavily on him. Mosi lay still, her breath a faint rasp, her face flushed with fever's cruel hold. Chayton dropped to his knees, cradling her, his voice breaking as he begged her to stay with him. Clara arrived, her eyes red from sleepless fear, checking Mosi's pulse with trembling hands, whispering that a doctor was too far. The vial and papers lay beside Chayton, their weight mocking his failure to save his sister. Mosi's eyes opened briefly, signing love with weak fingers, a gesture that shattered Chayton's heart. He kissed her brow, tears falling, promising to fight for their people in her name. Clara's hand rested on his shoulder, her silent strength a balm, urging him to act before Mosi slipped away, her fading life a call to expose Baxter's treachery. Firelight danced in the Lakota council tent as Chayton stood, his voice steady despite the grief clawing his chest. He held up the coal company's letters, recounting Baxter's plan to poison their crops, each word a plea for unity. Taza's eyes blazed, his fist pounding the ground, rallying younger warriors to Chayton's side. Hastiin, bandaged but resolute, nodded, his earlier doubt replaced by fierce support. An elder woman clutched Mosi's sketch, her voice trembling as she urged action, her words echoing Chayton's pain. Skeptical murmurs rose from older men, fearing retaliation. But Chayton's tale of Mosi's suffering silenced them. He proposed a gathering at the sacred grounds, a stand against Baxter, his heart pounding with hope and dread. The tent erupted in determined chants, the Lakota united, their resolve a fire that warmed Chayton's soul, even as Mosi's fading breath haunted his every word. Hastien's voice rose above the council's fire, praising Chayton's courage, his braided hair glinting as he spoke of their ancestors' strength. "This boy carries our fight," he said, his eyes meeting Chayton's, erasing past mistrust with a father's pride. He recalled Wounded Knee's scars, his voice cracking, urging the Lakota to prevent another loss. Chayton stood taller, Hastien's apology a weight lifted, his heart swelling with purpose. An elder suggested a sacred ceremony before their stand, and women began gathering sage, their hands quick with resolve. Hastiin named Chayton their leader, his hand firm on Chayton's shoulder, calling him guardian. The crowd roared, their unity a shield against the coming storm. Chayton clutched Mosi's sketch, her fragile spirit fueling his vow to protect their land, his fear buried beneath the trust, now shining in his people's eyes. Clara stepped into the council tent, her face pale but determined, a nervous journalist trailing behind her. "This is Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice firm, introducing a man eager to expose Baxter's crimes. Hayes scribbled as Chayton shared the coal company's plot, his pen scratching furiously, capturing every word. Clara held up Mosi's sketches, her voice trembling as she described the girl's signs linking Baxter to her pain, her eyes locked on Chayton's brawn. Hayes promised a front-page story, his excitement palpable, though he warned of needing more proof. Clara vowed to search her school records for Baxter's ties, her courage a spark in the tense air. Chayton thanked her, his gaze lingering, gratitude and unspoken love tightening his throat. As Hayes left, promising swift action, Chayton felt a surge of hope, tempered by fear for Mosi, whose life hung by a thread, urging him to fight before it was too late. The sacred grounds hummed with Lakota voices as Chayton led the ceremony, his bow raised to the twilight sky, its curve a silent vow. Sage smoke curled upward, carrying prayers for strength, while drums pulsed like a heartbeat. Chayton's voice rang out, reciting ancestral oaths, his heart heavy with Mosi's fading breath. Women danced, their shawls swirling, their steps defiant against the looming threat. Suddenly Walton's men charged in, rifles flashing, their shouts shattering the sacred air. "Disperse, savages!" Walton bellowed, firing into the sky, scattering children into their mother's arms. Hastiin stepped forward, his voice steady, but a soldier's club struck his shoulder, blood staining his shirt. Chayton's rage flared, his arrow knocked, aimed at Walton's chest, his hands trembling with the urge to fire. The crowd's cries drowned his thoughts, their fear a mirror of his own as he lowered his bow, choosing life over vengeance, his heart pounding with the cost of restraint amidst the chaos. Chayton's arrow flew, grazing the soldier's arm, a warning that halted Walton's advance. He stood over Hastiin, shielding the elder, his eyes blazing with defiance. The Lakota rallied, men grabbing sticks, women hurling stones, their voices a unified roar against the intruders. Walton's pistol cracked, the bullet striking a young warrior's leg, his scream piercing Chayton's heart. He dragged Hastiin to safety, blood soaking the elder's sleeve, his own shoulder throbbing from a soldier's shove. "Stay strong," Chayton whispered, his voice fierce, binding Hastien's wound with a torn cloth. Walton's men hesitated, outnumbered by the Lakota's fury, their rifles wavering. Chayton knocked another arrow, his stance unyielding, shouting for the people to hold the line. The air thickened with dust and rage, his pulse racing as he faced Walton's cold stare, knowing one wrong move could spark a massacre. Yet his resolve burned brighter, fueled by Mosi's fragile hope. A sharp twang cut through the chaos, an arrow piercing Walton's shoulder, sending him staggering with a grunt. Chayton spun, glimpsing the bowmaker's cloaked form vanishing into the pines, his bowstring still quivering. The soldiers faltered, their shouts turning to confusion, giving Chayton a chance to act. He rallied the Lakota, urging them to the forest's edge, his voice hoarse but commanding. Hastiin limped beside him, clutching his wound, his eyes fierce with pride. Another arrow flew, striking a soldier's rifle, shattering it, and Walton's men retreated, cursing under the bowmaker's unseen threat. Chayton found an arrow in the dirt, its note scrawled. "Town Hall now." His heart surged with gratitude, mingled with fear, as he led his people to safety, the ceremony's sacred fire still burning in his mind, a beacon against the violence that sought to break them. Clara's hands trembled as she tucked Mosi into a hidden tent, the girl's fevered breath shallow, her sketches scattered like fallen leaves. Mosi stirred, her fingers signing paper weakly, pointing to a drawing folded in her blanket. Clara unfolded it, finding a crumpled note Chayton had overlooked, detailing Baxter's crop-light shipments. Her heart raced, the paper a key to their fight, and she hugged Mosi, whispering, "You're so brave." Mosi's eyes flickered, signing help, her trust a fragile gift that warmed Clara's soul. She slipped the note into her pocket, vowing to reach Chayton, but Mosi's sudden cough stopped her, blood flecking her lips. Clara's fear surged, her hands shaking as she wiped Mosi's mouth, promising to return with help. She left the tent, the note burning in her grasp. Mosi's courage a quiet fire, urging her to run to the sacred grounds, where Chayton fought for their future. Chayton stood in the forest's shadow. The Lakota gathered around, their faces lit by resolve. Clara burst through the trees, breathless, pressing the blight note into his hands, her eyes wide with urgency. He read it, his jaw tightening at the proof of Baxter's treachery, each word a call to action. Hayes, the journalist, joined them, his notebook ready, scribbling as Chayton detailed the coal company's plot. "This goes to the federal press," Hayes vowed, his voice steady, promising a story to shake the nation. Chayton handed him the vial and letters, his heart pounding with hope, though Mosi's worsening fever haunted him. Clara's hand brushed his, her silent strength grounding him, urging him to trust Hayes. He nodded, his voice firm, asking Hayes to protect their names, the weight of their stand heavy but shared, as the forest whispered promises of justice. Amos's shadow loomed over Clara as she walked the town's edge, his grip snatching her arm, dragging her to Baxter's manor. "You're done, teacher," he growled, binding her wrists, his breath hot with whiskey. Baxter waited inside, his eyes cold, demanding Chayton's hiding place, promising pain if she refused. Clara stood tall, her voice steady, declaring the truth would soon break him. Amos struck her cheek, the sting sharp, but she held Baxter's gaze, thinking of Mosi's brave signs. Baxter locked her in a dusty storeroom, its walls suffocating, his threat to kill her echoing. Clara's heart raced, fear mingling with defiance, as she traced Mosi's "help" sign on the floor, a silent vow to endure. Footsteps faded, leaving her in darkness, her thoughts on Chayton, praying he'd find her before Baxter's cruelty snuffed out their fight. Chayton's blood ran cold when Taza whispered of Clara's capture, his mind flashing to her gentle hands signing with Mosi. He crept to Baxter's manor, the night thick with danger, his bow slung across his back. Slipping through a broken window, he heard Clara's muffled voice, his heart lurching with relief. Amos guarded the storeroom, his bulk blocking the door, but Chayton lunged, his knife slashing Amos's arm. The thug roared, swinging a fist that grazed Chayton's jaw, pain exploding in his skull. Chayton tackled him, their bodies crashing into crates, his strength fueled by fear for Clara. He pinned Amos, knocking him out with a sharp blow, his breath ragged as he freed Clara, her bruised face stirring his guilt. She clung to him, whispering, "We're not done." Her courage, a spark that steadied his shaking hands, urging them to escape into the night. A cloaked figure emerged from the manor's shadows. The bowmaker's arrow knocked, his voice low as he cut Clara's ropes. "I worked for Carter," he confessed, his face hidden, revealing he'd seen the coal company's plans and turned against them. Chayton's eyes widened, gratitude mixing with suspicion, as the bowmaker handed him a ledger, proof of Carter's funding. "There's a witness," he added, pointing to a trembling man, a former clerk, ready to testify. The bowmaker vanished, leaving an arrow etched with Lakota symbols, a final gift. Clara's hand found Chayton's, her relief palpable, her voice urging him to use the ledger. Chayton clutched it, his heart racing with the weight of truth. Mosi's fading life, a relentless call to act. They led the clerk to safety, the manor's lights fading behind them, their hope fragile but fierce. kindled by an ally's unexpected betrayal of their enemies. Baxter's hired thugs swarmed the Lakota camp, their torches setting tents ablaze, screams piercing the dawn. Chayton ran through the chaos, shouting for families to flee, his bow drawn against the attackers. A thug's blade nicked his arm, blood seeping, but he fired an arrow, dropping the man. Baxter appeared, his voice a venomous hiss, promising to bury them all. Chayton faced him, his arrow aimed, rage boiling at the man who'd hurt Mosi. Taza's warriors joined, driving the thugs back with clubs, their cries a defiant chorus. Clara helped douse flames, her face smudged with soot, her courage unwavering. Baxter fled, his threats trailing like smoke, but Chayton's heart sank. Knowing the camp's losses strengthened their resolve, Mosi's spirit urging him to end this fight before more was lost. Hastiin, bloodied but unbowed, rallied the Lakota at the camp's edge, his voice a thunderclap calling for resistance. Warriors grabbed spears. Women wielded stones, their faces fierce as they repelled Baxter's thugs. A young girl threw dirt in a thug's eyes, her bravery sparking Chayton's pride. Taza bound a captured attacker, dragging him to Hayes, who scribbled the scene, bowing to expose the assault. Hastiin ordered children hidden in the woods, his hands steady despite his wounds. Chayton fought beside him, his arrows swift, each shot a promise to protect their land. The thugs retreated, their torches fading, leaving the camp scarred but standing. Chayton embraced Hastiin, their shared strength a shield, his heart set on the town hall, where their final stand would demand justice for Mosi and their people. Clara's heart raced as she sat trapped in Baxter's storeroom, the air thick with dust and despair. Mosi's sign for help echoed in her mind, urging her to act. She tapped the wooden door in a rhythmic pattern, mimicking the girl's taught signals, her fingers sore but desperate. A faint shuffle outside made her pause, hope flaring as a Lakota boy, Taza's nephew, pried the door open, his eyes wide with fear. "Chayton sent me," he whispered, cutting her ropes, his small hands trembling. Clara recounted Amos's attack, her voice steady despite the bruise on her cheek, urging the boy to warn the camp. She slipped into the night, the bowmaker's ledger tucked in her shawl, its weight a lifeline. Reaching Chayton at the camp's edge, she pressed it into his hands, her relief mingling with dread for Mosi. Clara's gaze held his, her courage a quiet fire, vowing to stand with him at the town hall, their shared resolve a shield against the looming battle. Hayes, the journalist, stood in the Lakota camp, his coat dusted with ash, clutching Chayton's letters. He read the coal company's plot, his face paling at the scale of Baxter's greed, each page a damning truth. Chayton explained the crop blight's purpose, his voice raw, Mosi's fading life fueling his urgency. Hayes wired his editor in Chicago, his fingers swift, promising a federal expose that would rattle the nation. He photographed the vial, its murky liquid glinting, a silent witness to the crime. Clara added Mosi's sketches, her voice trembling as she linked Baxter to the boarding school's horrors, Hayes nodding grimly. Chayton asked for anonymity for his people, his eyes fierce, protecting their dignity. Hayes shook his hand, vowing justice, his excitement tempered by the camp's smoldering ruins. Chayton's heart lifted, a flicker of hope amidst grief. As he prepared for the town hall, Hayes's pen a weapon stronger than any arrow, carrying Mosi's truth to the world. Chayton's boots crunched on the path to the cousin's tent, his heart dreading the sight of Mosi's still form. Clara followed, her hand brushing his, her presence a quiet strength. Inside, Mosi lay motionless, her breath a faint whisper, her face pale as moonlight. Chayton knelt, cradling her, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Stay with me, little one." Clara checked her pulse, tears falling, confirming the fever had won, Mosi's life slipping away. Chayton sobbed, kissing her brow, her final sign for love etched in his memory, a wound that would never heal. The Lakota gathered, their soft chants honoring Mosi's spirit, their grief a shared cloak. Chayton clutched her sketch of their mother, vowing to fight for her legacy, his heart shattered but resolute. Clara's arms wrapped around him, her tears mingling with his, their shared loss binding them in a silent promise to carry Mosi's light forward. Chayton sat alone by the sacred grounds, Mosi's sketches spread before him, their lines a map of her broken dreams. Grief choked him, each drawing a reminder of her stolen voice, his failure to save her a heavy stone. Clara approached, her eyes red, kneeling beside him with Mosi's final sketch, a bow in Chayton's hands, her faith in him clear. "She believed in you," Clara whispered, her voice thick, urging him to honor Mosi's courage. Chayton's tears fell, his fear of faltering laid bare, but Clara's hand on his steadied his trembling heart. He traced the sketch's lines, Mosi's love a spark rekindling his purpose. Taza called from the camp, rallying warriors for the town hall, their trust a weight Chayton now carried. He stood, clutching the sketch, his resolve hardening, vowing to face Baxter for Mosi, his grief a fire driving him to the final stand. The town hall loomed under a gray dawn, its steps crowded with Lakota and townsfolk, their murmurs a tense hum. Chayton led his people, holding the ledger high, his voice steady as he named Baxter's crimes. Clara stood beside him, reading the coal company's letters, her words sharp, exposing the croplight's evil. The bowmaker appeared, cloaked, guiding the trembling clerk forward, who confessed Carter's orders to ruin the Lakota. Townsfolk gasped, their faces shifting from doubt to outrage, their whispers a growing storm. Chayton spoke of Mosi's suffering, his voice cracking, her loss a wound laid bare for all. Federal marshals arrived, their badges glinting, demanding order, but the crowd's anger drowned them, siding with Chayton. He met Clara's eyes, their shared strength a beacon, his heart pounding with the hope that Mosi's truth would finally break their enemies. The clerk's voice trembled as he held up Carter's signed orders, each word a nail in the coal baron's coffin. Hayes snapped photographs, his camera flashing, capturing the ledger's damning pages for the world. Carter pushed through the crowd, his face red, denying all, but the townsfolk jeered, their trust in him crumbling. The clerk recounted secret meetings, his voice growing bold, pinning Carter as the mastermind. Marshals seized Carter, his silk suit rumpled, his curses fading as they cuffed him. Chayton watched, his chest tight, justice for Mosi a bittersweet victory without her smile. The crowd chanted for the Lakota, their support a tide lifting Chayton's spirit. Clara squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride, their triumph a shared vow to honor Mosi's memory, the hall's air alive with the promise of change. Marshals stormed Baxter's manor, their boots echoing as they uncovered crates of blight and forged land deeds. Walton, cornered in his station, confessed his role, his badge tarnished, his voice low with shame. Baxter fled to the hills, his horse galloping, but marshals tracked him, cuffing him under a cold moon. Hayes's article hit the presses, its headline screaming, "Coal Conspiracy Exposed," detailing every crime. Townsfolk gathered, demanding trials, their outrage a fire that warmed Chayton's weary heart. The Lakota were called as witnesses, their voices rising in the courthouse, Taza's fist clenched with pride. Chayton stood silent, refusing vengeance, his eyes on Mosi's sketch, seeking only truth. Baxter and Walton awaited judgment, their cells a stark end to their reign, leaving Chayton hollow yet resolute, his fight for Mosi's justice nearly complete. The sacred grounds bloomed with new corn, the Lakota's fields restored as federal orders returned their land. Chayton walked the rows, his hands brushing green stalks, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. Hastiin led a ceremony, sage smoke rising, honoring the ancestors and Mosi's spirit. "You saved us," he told Chayton, his voice warm, naming him a guardian of their people. Townsfolk arrived, some offering apologies, their hands extended in peace, a fragile bridge across old divides. Hayes sent a letter, praising Chayton's courage, his article sparking reforms. The Lakota rebuilt their camp, laughter returning, a sound Chayton cherished despite his grief. He knelt by Mosi's grave, her stone etched with her name, promising to protect their legacy, his heart finding solace in the land's rebirth, a testament to their unbreakable spirit. The council tent glowed as the Lakota offered Chayton a seat among the elders, their voices united in respect. He declined, his hands tracing a new bow, his heart tied to the craft that grounded him. Hastiin gifted him an ancient arrow, its feathers worn, a symbol of honor that warmed Chayton's soul. Children gathered, listening as Taza told Mosi's story, her courage woven into their songs. Chayton taught them to carve bows, his voice soft, passing on their culture with each lesson. He visited Mosi's grave daily, her sketches tucked in his shirt, her love a constant guide. The camp held a feast, laughter echoing, warriors toasting Chayton as their hero. He smiled, his heart full, knowing Mosi's spirit lived in their unity, her sacrifice the spark that saved their land. Chayton stood on the sacred grounds, his bow finished, its wood smooth under his calloused hands. Clara joined him, her eyes bright, their love now open, accepted by the Lakota despite old prejudices. They planned a school to teach Lakota stories, Mosi's sketches its heart, her legacy a bridge between worlds. The fields thrived, free of blight, each stalk a victory over Baxter's greed. Federal courts sentenced Baxter and Carter, their crimes laid bare, the nation watching in shame. Chayton carved Mosi's name into a new bow, tears falling, her absence a wound that fueled his purpose. The wind carried a distant howl, the ancestors' approval lifting his spirit. He held Clara's hand, their future uncertain but strong, Mosi's courage a light guiding them to preserve their people's heart, a testament to love's power over hatred.